What's the worst thing someone has ever said to you in front of everyone you love? I used to think I could handle anything, that I'd learned to grow a thick skin. But nothing prepared me for that night. My birthday. I had tried so hard to make it simple. No big party, no expensive restaurant. Just a family dinner in Queens, in the same house where I grew up. I told myself, keep it small, keep it warm. Maybe this time things won't fall apart. The table looked beautiful, at least to me. My aunt had brought flowers. The candles flickered against the walls. The smell of pasta, my favorite, filled the room. For the first time in a long time, I felt like maybe I could breathe. The laughter came easily at first. My cousins teased each other. My uncle cracked jokes about the Mets losing again. Even my father, who rarely laughed, let out a low chuckle when my aunt made fun of his old record player still sitting in the living room. And then it was time for the toast. My uncle stood, glass raised. "To Sophia," he said. "May this year bring her joy, and may she find everything she's looking for." Everyone smiled, glasses lifted, except my father's. He didn't move. He just stared across the table, eyes hard, lips pressed thin. Then he spoke. "You've been living off other people for too long." The words sliced through the room like glass shattering. My fork froze halfway to my mouth. My cousin stopped mid-laugh. My aunt's smile fell away. "You need to grow up," he added, his voice flat. The silence that followed felt like it could suffocate me. Every eye turned toward me, waiting for a response. I tried to swallow, but my throat was dry. My heart pounded so loudly I was sure everyone could hear it. I forced a laugh. "Thanks, Dad. Great speech." My voice cracked. The sound echoed, awkward and painful. No one laughed with me. I stared at the cake sitting in the center of the table, the candles waiting to be lit. Suddenly it didn't look sweet. It looked cruel, like a spotlight on my failure. And there he sat, arms folded across his chest, like a judge delivering a sentence. He didn't flinch. He didn't soften. What would you do sitting there? Smile like nothing happened? Pretend you didn't just get humiliated in front of your entire family? Or stand up and walk away? I excused myself to the bathroom. My hands shook as I turned the lock. I leaned over the sink, staring at my reflection, red eyes, pale face, shoulders heavy with years of carrying too much. I whispered to myself, "Not again. Not this year." Because the truth was, this wasn't the first time. My father had been throwing knives made of words my whole life. When I lost my job, he said, "Told you that career wouldn't last." When I came back after my divorce, he muttered, "Should have chosen better." But this was different. This was public. I splashed water on my face, trying to hide the tears. I took a deep breath, forced a smile, and walked back out. The room had changed. The laughter was gone, replaced by tight conversations and forced smiles. My cousins avoided my eyes. My aunt fiddled with her napkin. And my father? He didn't even look at me. Something inside me snapped. Not loud, not dramatic, just quiet. A final break. I sat down, ate a few more bites, pretended to laugh when someone cracked a joke. I blew out the candles. Everyone clapped, but it felt hollow. And when the plates were cleared, I stood, grabbed my bag. "Thanks for dinner," I said. My voice didn't shake this time. No one stopped me. The night air outside was cold, but it felt cleaner than the air in that dining room. I pulled my coat tight around me, the streetlights casting long shadows on the sidewalk. Each step toward my car felt heavy, but also light. Painful, yes, but freeing. That was the night something ended. That was the night I decided I couldn't keep playing this role anymore. And so my birthday became the night I walked away. Because sometimes the cruelest words are the ones that finally push you out the door. The lock clicked into place, and I finally let myself collapse against the sink. My knees almost gave out. The laughter from the dining room had already died, but the silence still roared inside my ears. One sentence from him, and suddenly the whole night felt poisoned. I looked into the mirror, and I barely recognized the woman staring back. Eyes glassy, rimmed red, shoulders tight, almost shaking, makeup smudged just enough to betray what I tried so hard to hide. I whispered, "Not again, not this year," because it had always been like this, hadn't it? His words cutting me down. Sometimes sharp and quick, sometimes slow and quiet, but always enough to leave a mark. When I was a teenager, it was my grades. Later, it was my marriage. When that failed, he never let me forget it. And now, here I was, 32 years old, sitting in his house, celebrating my birthday like a child waiting for approval. And what did I get? A reminder that in his eyes, I was nothing more than a burden. I gripped the counter, trying to breathe. The faucet dripped, steady and cruel, like a ticking clock reminding me I didn't belong here anymore. I thought about walking out of the bathroom and pretending. Smiling, laughing, brushing it off. I'd done it before. I knew I could do it again, but something in me refused. The tears came, hot and angry, not just from tonight, but from years of swallowing my pride. From all the times I'd told myself, just one more chance. He'll see me differently next time, but there was no next time. The humiliation was too heavy, the sting too sharp. It wasn't just about him anymore. It was about me, my dignity, my peace. I pressed a tissue to my face, fixing what I could. I practiced a smile in the mirror, the kind that wouldn't fool anyone but might hold me together long enough to get through the candles. In that tiny bathroom, I made a silent vow. This was the last time I would let him define me. The last time I would sit quietly while he turned a celebration into a stage for my shame. I unlocked the door and stepped out. My legs were steady now, my face calm. No one stopped their conversations. No one asked if I was okay. I slid back into my chair, let them light the candles, blew them out with a single breath. Everyone clapped. My father didn't even look at me. And I realized then, nothing I did would ever be enough for him. So it was time to stop trying. I didn't wait until morning. I couldn't. The moment the dishes were cleared, the moment the last fake laugh faded, I knew. I wasn't staying another night in that house. Back in my room, I pulled an old suitcase from the closet. The zipper rasped open like a line drawn in the sand. No turning back. I grabbed the first pile of clothes I could reach. Jeans, sweaters, socks balled together. Some were folded, some weren't. It didn't matter. This wasn't about order, it was about escape. Shoes went next. 2 pairs, practical, nothing fancy. On the nightstand sat a photo of me and my mom. She'd been gone for years, but her smile still carried warmth. I wrapped it carefully in a sweatshirt before sliding it into the suitcase. That was the one thing I couldn't leave behind. The air felt heavy, like even the walls knew I was leaving. Every sound seemed louder. The creak of the bed, the rustle of fabric, the dull hum of the refrigerator down the hall. My chest tightened at the thought of him walking in, arms crossed, ready to deliver another line that would slice me open. But the house stayed quiet. I sat on the edge of the bed, phone in hand, canceling everything I had been paying for. Internet? Mine. Streaming accounts? Mine. Cell phone family plan? Mine. With every confirmation screen, I felt something shift inside me. Anger, yes, but also relief. Proof. For all the times he called me a burden, I held the receipts. He'd never know how much I'd carried for him. The suitcase grew heavier, and so did my thoughts. Where was I going to sleep tonight? Brooklyn, maybe. My friend had offered her couch once, half joking, half serious. Would she really mean it now? I hesitated, staring at the packed bag. Fear clawed at me. The unknown loomed, wide and dark. But then I remembered the look on his face at dinner. The smug satisfaction of breaking me down. And suddenly the fear didn't matter. Staying would mean letting him win. No, not this time. I zipped the suitcase shut, the sound final and sharp. I pulled my coat around me and stood there for a moment, scanning the room. The books I didn't pack, the posters curling at the edges, the bed I'd slept in too long. It didn't feel like home anymore. Maybe it never had. Dragging the suitcase through the living room felt surreal, each step a goodbye. Past the kitchen where I'd cooked dinners he barely thanked me for. Past the couch where he watched hours of TV while I sat in silence. Past the door that had once felt like safety, but now only felt like a trap. When the door clicked shut behind me, I let out a shaky breath. The night air was biting, but it felt cleaner than anything inside. I pulled out my phone and typed a message. "Hey, is your couch still open? I need somewhere tonight." The text hung there, unsent for a beat. My thumb trembled. Then I hit send. The suitcase handle dug into my palm as I waited on the quiet street. Streetlights buzzed. My breath fogged in the cold. And though my whole life had just been packed into one bag, for the first time in years, I felt something I hadn't expected. Possibility. Because sometimes leaving isn't about what you're running from. It's about who you're finally running toward. Yourself. The door shut behind me with a dull thud, and suddenly the silence of the night swallowed me whole. I stood there for a moment, suitcase by my side, staring at the familiar street that now felt like foreign territory. The cold air bit at my cheeks, sharper than I expected. My breath came out in little white clouds, rising and vanishing before I could catch them. I pulled my coat tighter, gripping the handle of the suitcase as if it might anchor me in this moment. I glanced back once, just once. The house stood still, windows glowing faintly, as if nothing had happened. As if inside, people were still eating cake, laughing at jokes, sipping wine. But for me, it was over. That chapter was closed. I took a step, then another. The wheels of my suitcase rattled against the uneven sidewalk, the sound too loud in the quiet street. My heart beat in rhythm with it, steady, determined, but heavy. I pulled out my phone, screen glowing in the dark. My fingers hovered over a single thread. My friend in Brooklyn, the one who had once said, "You know, if it ever gets too much, you've got my couch." At the time, I laughed it off, but tonight it wasn't a joke. I typed, "Hey, is your couch still open? I need a place tonight," and hit send. For a moment, I sat down right there on my suitcase, the cold seeping through my coat. My eyes drifted across the empty street, lit only by a flickering street lamp. I thought about all the birthdays before this one, the quiet disappointments, the broken promises, the way I always held on, hoping the next year would be different. But maybe this year was different, not because of him, but because of me. The phone buzzed in my hand, a reply. "Of course. Come over, I'll wait up." Relief rushed through me like warm air after a long winter. My chest loosened, my shoulders dropped. I wasn't alone, not tonight. I stood, pulling the suitcase behind me, and started walking toward the train station. Each step felt like pulling away from the weight of that house, each breath a little lighter. The city stretched out ahead, wide and uncertain, but alive. It wasn't safety, it wasn't comfort, but it was mine to claim. And in that moment, dragging my life down a quiet Queens sidewalk, I realized something simple. Sometimes freedom doesn't feel like victory. Sometimes it just feels like cold air and a long walk under streetlights. But even that was better than staying. The subway screeched into the station, and I dragged my suitcase onto the nearly empty car. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, flickering just enough to make me feel like the city itself was restless. I clutched the metal pole, rocking with the train as it lurched forward. My phone buzzed again. "Door's unlocked. Come in when you get here." Relief washed over me, but it was tangled with nerves. By the time I reached Brooklyn, the streets were quiet. My friend's building was old, the kind with cracked bricks and narrow stairs that carried the weight of decades. She opened the door before I could knock, her eyes wide with worry. No questions, no judgment. Just a hug that lasted longer than I expected. For the first time that night, I didn't feel invisible. Her couch was small, the cushions worn, but when I sank into it, it felt like more than furniture. It felt like sanctuary. I stared at the ceiling, listening to the hum of traffic outside, and thought, this isn't permanent, but it's enough. Enough to breathe. Enough to remind me I wasn't completely alone. The next morning, sunlight crept through the blinds, slicing the room into stripes of gold. I sat up, hair tangled, heart heavy, but a strange clarity filled me. I couldn't go back. I wouldn't. So I started looking. Craigslist ads, flyers taped to lampposts, listings buried on rental sites. Every apartment seemed too expensive, too far, too broken. But after 3 days, I found it. A tiny studio in Brooklyn Heights. 1 room, barely enough for a bed and a desk, but it had a window that overlooked the street, where people walked their dogs and carried coffee cups. It was small, but it was mine. Signing the lease felt surreal. My hand trembled as I wrote my name, as if the pen itself carried the weight of a new life. I walked into the apartment with nothing but my suitcase and a bag of groceries. The floor creaked under my steps, the walls bare and unwelcoming, but I smiled anyway. I set the photo of my mom on the windowsill. I made coffee in a chipped mug I'd bought at a thrift store. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like a guest in someone else's story. It wasn't glamorous. The radiator rattled like it was coughing. The shower leaked. The mattress I bought secondhand sank in the middle. But when I closed the door at night, it was my door. No voices cutting me down, no eyes judging me. Just silence and the hum of my own breath. Every evening, I'd light a candle by the window and watch the city move. People laughed on the sidewalks. Music drifted from cars. The world kept spinning and I was still standing. And maybe that was enough for now, because sometimes freedom doesn't come with fireworks. Sometimes it comes in the shape of a studio apartment where the rent drains your bank account, but the air tastes like choice. It wasn't much, but it was mine. The studio was bare at first, just a mattress on the floor, 1 thrifted chair, and a folding table I pretended was a desk. But little by little, I carved out space that felt like me. A lamp here, a blanket there, and of course, the photo of my mom watching from the windowsill. Money was tight, so I picked up freelancing again. It wasn't glamorous. Most nights I sat hunched over my laptop, the glow from the screen the only light in the room. I wrote product descriptions, edited resumes, even drafted blog posts for strangers I'd never meet. At first, the pay barely covered groceries. But then, one client sent a message. "You did an amazing job. Can I hire you again?" That sentence lit something inside me. It wasn't just about money, it was proof. Proof that my words mattered to someone. Proof that I could stand on my own, even if it was shaky at first. I started setting routines. Morning coffee while the city stirred outside. Work during the day. Breaks spent walking down to the corner cafe where nobody knew me but still smiled when I came in. Evenings on the fire escape, the city humming below, reminding me I was part of something bigger. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was waiting for life to begin. It was already happening. But freedom had a price. Rent took most of what I made. Groceries ate the rest. Some nights I skipped dinner, telling myself I wasn't hungry. Other nights, I wondered if I'd made a mistake leaving comfort, even if comfort came with cruelty. Still, each time I thought of going back, I pictured that birthday table, my father's folded arms, his cold voice, the silence that wrapped around me like a cage. And suddenly, the leaky faucet and the empty fridge didn't feel so bad. Then came the first real win, a bigger client, a contract worth more than I'd seen in months. I remember staring at the email, my hands trembling. I whispered out loud, "This is it. This is the start." That night, I treated myself to takeout. Thai food, steaming hot, eaten right out of the carton on the floor. The noodles stuck together, the sauce spilled on my jeans, and I laughed. Alone, yes, but free. And in that laugh, I heard something I hadn't in years. A spark. Small, flickering, but real. Because sometimes hope doesn't arrive like a flood. Sometimes it shows up in whispers. In a client's email, in the hum of a busy cafe, in the taste of noodles eaten on the floor of a studio that finally feels like yours. It started on a Tuesday. I was sitting at my tiny desk, coffee gone cold, half focused on another project deadline. My phone buzzed once, then again, then nonstop. At first I thought it was a glitch, but when I picked it up, my chest tightened. Notifications flooded the screen, tags, messages, comments from people I didn't even know. I clicked the first link, and there it was, a Facebook post. My father's profile picture, stern, familiar, sitting right next to words that nearly knocked the breath out of me. My daughter has been living off me for years. I told her enough was enough. Some people never learn responsibility. My hand shook. He didn't just shame me at a dinner table anymore. He'd taken it online, and people, friends, distant relatives, even strangers, were sharing it, adding their own comments, some harsh, some smug, some cruel in ways only the internet can deliver. I scrolled, eyes burning. What a leech! Parents shouldn't have to deal with grown kids freeloading. Kick her out sooner. Each one felt like a stone thrown straight at me. The worst part? They didn't even know the truth. They didn't know about the bills I'd paid, the streaming services I covered, the groceries I bought without asking. They didn't know how much I'd carried quietly, just to keep peace in that house. I wanted to scream back, to type furiously in defense, to plaster receipts across the screen, to call him out for lying. My fingers hovered over the keyboard more than once, but then I remembered the bathroom mirror on my birthday night, the vow I'd made. No more letting him pull me into his stage. Still, the silence cut deep. Friends texted, "Are you okay?" Colleagues whispered in messages, "Ignore it. People move on." But ignoring didn't stop the comments. Ignoring didn't erase the fact that my name was trending in circles I never asked to join. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat on the edge of my bed, scrolling through endless replies. Each one another reminder that humiliation doesn't just live in private anymore. It multiplies online. It feeds itself. I thought about deleting my accounts, disappearing, but part of me refused. Why should I vanish when I wasn't the one lying? Why should his version of me stand uncontested? The next morning, the post had been shared thousands of times. I walked into the cafe near my building, and I swore I felt eyes on me. Did they know? Were they laughing behind their cups of coffee? Or was it just in my head? The paranoia gnawed at me anyway, and that's when the real fear set in. Not just of humiliation, but of losing everything I was building. Clients could see this, future employers, people who didn't know me would assume the worst. My father hadn't just tried to shame me. He'd put my entire future on the line. I went home, sat at the tiny desk, and buried my face in my hands. For years, I had lived under his roof, under his judgment. I thought leaving meant freedom, but now I realized you can leave a house, but escaping a narrative someone writes about you is harder. Scrolling again, I noticed one detail. The photo he used in his post. It wasn't recent. It was from months ago, maybe even a year. He had been planning this, waiting, saving ammunition for the moment it would hurt most. That thought chilled me more than the comments, because this wasn't a slip of anger, this was deliberate, calculated. And as I sat there, exhausted, angry, and terrified, one question circled in my mind. What do you do when the person who raised you becomes the person who tries hardest to destroy you? I didn't have the answer yet, but I knew one thing: this was just the beginning of another fight. Because sometimes the people who should protect you are the ones who put you on trial, not in private, but in the court of the internet. And the jury? Strangers with keyboards. The next few days blurred together. Every time I opened my phone, there it was, my father's posts spreading like wildfire. People I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly had opinions about me. Old classmates, distant cousins, even neighbors chiming in with comments that stung worse than strangers. The comment section was a battlefield. Strangers lined up to throw insults. Grow up, get a job, pathetic. Others joined in with memes, screenshots, and sarcastic gifs, turning my life into entertainment. It felt like I had been shoved onto a stage I never auditioned for. And then came the family. My aunt messaged me privately, "Sophia, maybe you should just apologize. It'll calm him down." My cousin posted under the thread, "She's always been dramatic." Seeing it from them hurt in a way strangers never could. Blood was supposed to run deeper than likes and shares. I wanted to defend myself, to tell them about the nights I paid the bills while he pretended I was freeloading, to remind them of the groceries I stocked, the errands I ran, the endless sacrifices I made. But no one was asking for the truth. They were asking for a spectacle. At the same time, I got messages from people I barely knew offering pity. "Hang in there. Don't let the haters get to you." The words sounded kind, but they didn't stop the storm. Every ping from my phone set my nerves on edge. My hands shook, my chest tightened. I caught myself checking comments at 2 a.m., scrolling until my eyes burned. The noise followed me everywhere, on the subway, in the cafe, even in the grocery line. I imagined whispers, stares, judgment. Maybe it was paranoia, maybe not. The cruelest part? My father never replied to anyone. He didn't argue, didn't clarify, didn't defend. He just let his words sit there, letting others build the narrative for him. It was like he knew the silence would hurt more than anything else. One night, I sat with my laptop open, cursor blinking on a blank post. I could expose him. I could upload the receipts, the bank statements, the bills, the proof that I wasn't what he claimed. The urge was strong, almost unbearable. But another thought crept in. If I did that, would I be any different? Wouldn't I just be feeding the same fire? The weight of it all left me restless. I paced the apartment, lights off, city sounds drifting in through the window. For the first time since moving out, I didn't feel safe in my own space. Not because of the walls, but because of the noise beyond them. In that moment, I realized humiliation doesn't always happen face to face. Sometimes it's digital. Sometimes it's 100 faceless names reminding you that your story is no longer yours alone. And yet, deep down, I knew something. Storms burn out, even viral ones. The question was, would I survive until then? I stared at that blinking cursor for what felt like hours. A single empty box, daring me to fill it. One post from me could change everything, or at least that's what I told myself. I could upload proof, screenshots of payments, bank statements, text messages where my father asked for money. Receipts don't lie. I could crush his story with one click. But then another voice whispered, "And what would that make you?" I closed the laptop, opened it again. My phone buzzed with more notifications, comments piling up like fresh bruises. "She's just bitter. Some people never grow up." The temptation grew louder. Why stay silent when silence felt like surrender? I called my friend that night. Should I say something? Should I fight back? My voice cracked, raw with exhaustion. She hesitated. "If you do, it'll never end. He'll post again. People will twist it. Do you really want to live in that cycle?" Her words stung because they were true, but still, the injustice clawed at me. How could I let him rewrite my life? I scrolled through old photos, looking for courage. Birthday parties where I paid for the cake. Holidays where I bought the gifts. Receipts tucked into folders that proved I wasn't what he claimed. Each one felt like a weapon I could wield. And yet, every time I imagined hitting post, my stomach churned. Because I knew the internet doesn't want truth, it wants drama. And if I gave it mine, it would chew me up just the same. That night, I lay awake, phone in hand, staring at the ceiling. I imagined my father smiling to himself, satisfied that his silence was winning. Rage burned hot in my chest. The next morning, I tried to distract myself with work, but even my clients noticed. "You seem off today," one wrote in an email. They didn't know what was happening, but I could see it bleeding into everything: my livelihood, my identity, my peace. By afternoon, the cursor blinked at me again. I typed 3 words: "Here's the truth," and stopped. Deleted it, typed again, deleted again. My heart raced with each attempt. Then my phone rang. It was another friend, one I hadn't talked to in months. She had seen the post, the comments, the noise. Her voice was calm but steady. "Sophia, sometimes silence isn't weakness. Sometimes it's the loudest answer." I wanted to believe her, I really did. But inside, the temptation to clap back lingered, pulsing like a second heartbeat. Because how do you stand still while the world paints you in colors that aren't yours? How long before silence feels less like strength and more like erasure? I didn't post that day or the day after, but every time I opened my laptop, the blank screen reminded me of the choice I hadn't made. And deep down, I knew this wasn't over. The internet wasn't the only place the story followed me. Soon it spilled into real life, like smoke drifting under every door. At the cafe where I worked most mornings, I caught the barista's eyes lingering too long when she handed me my coffee. A couple at the corner table whispered after glancing at me, their voices low but sharp enough to sting. Maybe it was my imagination, maybe not. But once the thought took root, I couldn't shake it. On the subway, 2 teenagers scrolled through their phones, laughing. I swore I saw my father's post flash across their screen for just a second. My heart thudded. I pulled my scarf tighter around my face, wishing I could vanish into the seat. Even my freelance work felt shaky. One client canceled suddenly, no explanation. Another grew distant, replies curt where they'd once been warm. I wondered if they'd Googled my name, if the post had reached them too. The whispers weren't always spoken. Sometimes they lived in my own head. Every laugh on the street, every sideways glance, every shift in conversation felt loaded with judgment. I found myself walking faster, keeping my head down, avoiding places I used to enjoy. And then there were the texts, not many but enough. An old classmate: "Saw what your dad posted, yikes. Hope you're okay." A neighbor: "Is it true?" Each one a knife slipped between my ribs. At night, the city outside my window moved on as if nothing had changed. Cars honked, music thumped, people laughed on sidewalks. But inside my little studio, the noise of it all pressed down until I felt smaller than ever. I tried journaling, scribbling my thoughts until the pages blurred. Some nights it helped, other nights it only made the weight heavier. I kept asking myself, was I overreacting? Was I letting his words control me even after I'd left? But then I'd remember the way my stomach dropped when I first saw that post, the way strangers' comments still clawed at me, the way people who should have known better stayed silent, or worse, joined in. It wasn't just online anymore, it was everywhere, and that realization cut the deepest. By the time a week had passed, I was unraveling. My routine cracked. Work piled up unanswered. I skipped meals without noticing. The silence of my studio, once comforting, now pressed against me like a weight. That's when my friend showed up. The same friend whose couch I had first landed on when I left home. She didn't text, she didn't call. She just knocked, hard and steady, until I opened the door. One look at me and her face softened. "You're not okay," she said simply. Not a question, just fact. I tried to argue, to brush it off, but my voice wavered. She stepped inside, set down a bag of takeout, and made me sit. We ate in silence for a while. Warm noodles, steam rising between us, the clatter of chopsticks filling the space where words couldn't. Finally, she leaned forward. Sophia, you can't keep letting him live rent-free in your head. He's winning every time you check those comments." Her words stung because they were true. I confessed everything then. The sleepless nights, the temptation to clap back, the paranoia on subways and in cafes. She listened without interrupting, eyes steady on mine. When I finished, she said, "You don't need to fight his version of you. You need to build your own." The sentence landed like a spark in dry wood. Build my own. It wasn't about proving him wrong anymore. It was about proving myself right. She pushed the bag of leftovers toward me. "Start small. Eat, sleep, work. One step at a time. Don't give him more of your energy. Use it for you." That night, after she left, I sat with those words. Build my own. They echoed louder than the comments, louder than the shame. So I made a decision. I deleted the app from my phone. Not forever, but enough. Enough to give myself breathing room. Enough to remind myself that the internet isn't the whole world, even when it feels like it is. The silence that followed wasn't heavy this time. It was clean. For the first time in days, I slept through the night. The next morning, I woke up before the alarm, made coffee, sat at my desk, opened my laptop, not to scroll, but to work. Words flowed again, shaky but steady. I finished 2 assignments before noon. Small victories, but victories all the same. And as the day ended, I realized something. His story might have gone viral, but it didn't have to define me. I still had power over my own narrative. I still had a choice in how to live, because sometimes the loudest way to fight back isn't shouting louder, it's living better. The days that followed felt different. Not easier, but lighter. Like I had finally shifted the weight off one shoulder. Without the constant buzz of notifications, I could hear myself think again. And in that quiet, I began to ask, if I'm not defined by his version of me, then who am I? I started writing, not for clients, not for money, but for me. Short entries at first, fragments really. I am more than his words. I am not a leech. I am building. It felt awkward, almost childish, but every sentence stitched me back together a little more. One evening, I opened a blank page on my laptop and wrote about the night of my birthday. Not to share, not yet, just to tell the truth. For myself. The candles, the smirk, the silence at the table, the bathroom mirror. I wrote until the screen blurred and my chest loosened. By the time I stopped, I had 10 pages, raw, messy, but mine. The writing became a ritual. Morning coffee, then an hour of pouring my life onto the page. Some days, it was anger. Other days, memories I'd buried so deep I almost forgot they existed. But in each word, I found a voice I thought I'd lost. My friend noticed the change. "You're different," she said one night over dinner. "Less heavy." And I realized she was right. The comments still existed, the post was still out there, but it didn't consume me anymore. I was busy crafting something else, my own narrative. The idea came slowly, like a seed I didn't know I'd planted. If strangers could spread lies about me, why couldn't I spread the truth, on my own terms? Not defensive, not petty, but honest. Not for him, for me. So I set up a blog. Simple, free, nothing fancy. I called it Second Start, and I uploaded one of my entries, cleaned up just enough to be readable. I didn't expect much, maybe a few clicks, maybe nothing at all. The next morning, I checked and saw 3 comments. Strangers. One wrote, "I've been there too. Thank you for putting this into words." Another said, "This feels like my story." I sat there stunned, because for the first time in weeks, people weren't laughing at me. They were connecting with me, not through my father's lens, but through mine. And in that moment, I felt something I hadn't in a long time. Agency. Because sometimes healing isn't about silencing the lies. It's about speaking your own truth loud enough to hear it echo back. At first, the blog felt like whispering into the void. A handful of readers here, a stray comment there. But slowly, steadily, something shifted. My words began to travel further than I ever expected. One morning, I woke up to dozens of emails in my inbox. Subject lines like, "Thank you for writing this," and "I thought I was alone." People from different cities, even different countries, telling me their own stories of humiliation, control, or walking away from toxic families. They weren't just reading, they were relating. I realized then, the post that was meant to break me had accidentally connected me with others who'd been broken too. The blog grew faster than I could keep up with. I started setting aside time each week to reply, to engage, to share more. My entries were raw, honest, sometimes messy, but they resonated. When I wrote about blowing out candles with shaky hands, readers told me about birthdays ruined in their own ways. When I wrote about the silence of my studio apartment, people admitted they too had found freedom in lonely, imperfect spaces. Then came the day a journalist reached out. She'd found my blog and wanted to feature it in a piece about adult children setting boundaries. My first instinct was panic. Exposure meant risk. What if my father saw it? What if he tried again? But then I remembered the vow I made in that bathroom mirror. No more letting him control the narrative, so I said yes. The article went live a week later. Suddenly, my blog wasn't a quiet corner anymore. It was a gathering place. Traffic spiked, comments poured in, and for the first time, I felt like my story wasn't just mine. It belonged to anyone who needed to hear that leaving doesn't make you weak. It makes you free. Of course, not all feedback was kind. Trolls still surfaced, throwing the same old insults, but now their words felt smaller, drowned out by the chorus of voices saying, "Me too." I printed one email and taped it to my wall. It read, "I was going to move back in with my parents, even though I knew it would destroy me. After reading your blog, I decided not to. Thank you." I stared at that piece of paper every morning. It reminded me that truth once spoken has ripples you can't predict. And maybe that was the ultimate revenge. Not clapping back, not exposing receipts, but transforming pain into connection. Because when truth finds an audience, lies lose their power. It happened on a quiet Sunday morning. The kind where the city feels slower, like even the subways are still waking up. I was sipping coffee by the window, scrolling through messages on my blog, when my phone lit up with a name I hadn't seen in months. My father. For a moment, I froze. The mug trembled in my hand. Part of me wanted to ignore it, let it ring into silence. But curiosity, or maybe stubbornness, made me swipe. His voice was clipped, colder than I remembered. "So, this is what you've been doing? Writing about me online? Making me look like some kind of monster?" I swallowed hard. "I didn't use your name." "You didn't have to," he snapped. "People know. Family knows." "Do you enjoy embarrassing me?" A bitter laugh almost slipped out. Embarrassing him? After everything he had done to me? To my reputation? But I caught myself. Anger wouldn't win here. "I'm just telling my story," I said quietly. "It's mine to tell." There was a pause, long enough for me to hear the faint hum of his TV in the background. Then he said, "Take it down." No question, no request. Just a command, the same tone he'd used my entire life. But something in me had shifted. The old reflex, to shrink, to obey, didn't surface this time. Instead, I heard my own voice, steady and calm. No. Silence stretched across the line. For a second, I thought the call had dropped. Then his words landed, sharp as knives. "You'll regret this." And the line went dead. I stared at the screen, my reflection faint against the black glass. My hand shook, but not from fear, from adrenaline. From the realization that I had just done something I'd never managed before. I stood up to him and didn't break. The weight of it settled in slowly. He could threaten, he could rage, he could sulk, but he no longer had control over me. Not my home, not my money, not my voice. I set the phone down, heart still racing. Outside, the city moved on. Cars honking, children laughing, life spilling forward. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I was running from him anymore. I was simply moving on. Because sometimes the most unexpected call isn't the one you answer. It's the one where you finally hear yourself say no and mean it. The call lingered in my mind for days, like an echo I couldn't quite silence. But instead of rattling me, it clarified something. I had reached the point where his voice no longer dictated my choices. And that realization became the fuel I didn't know I needed. I poured myself into the blog, not as a place to vent anymore, but as a platform to build. I started writing consistently. Pieces about setting boundaries, about survival, about the quiet strength of rebuilding when the world thinks you've fallen. My words weren't polished, not always pretty, but they were true. And truth has a way of resonating, readers multiplied. Messages grew deeper, more vulnerable. Strangers wrote about parents who belittled them, partners who controlled them, jobs that drained them. Each story different, but all woven with the same thread. The fight to reclaim dignity. My blog wasn't just mine anymore. It had become a mirror where people could finally see themselves. One night, I hosted a small gathering in my tiny studio. Candles flickered against bare walls, mismatched chairs crowded around, and a few readers, now friends, sat cross-legged on the floor. We shared food, laughter, and stories that once carried shame, but now sounded like victory songs. For the first time, the walls of my apartment didn't feel too small. They felt full. And then the letter arrived. A plain envelope slipped under my door. Inside, a card from my mother's sister, the aunt who had once told me to apologize, to keep the peace. Her handwriting wavered, but the words were clear. I read your blog. I didn't understand before. Now I do. I'm sorry. Tears blurred the ink, because sometimes validation doesn't come from the whole world. It comes from one voice finally admitting they were wrong. I didn't call my father again. I didn't need to. His silence became its own answer. The difference now was that his silence no longer defined me. My story had moved on without him. Months later, I stood on a stage at a community event, microphone trembling in my hand, looking out at a small audience gathered to hear me speak about resilience. My heart pounded. But when I opened my mouth, the words flowed like they'd been waiting their whole lives to be heard. I told them about that birthday, about the suitcase on the cold sidewalk, about the studio that rattled and leaked but became home. I told them about truth and lies and the courage it takes to choose your own voice. When the applause came, it wasn't thunderous, but it was enough. Enough to tell me I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was thriving. Walking home that night, city lights glittering above, I thought about the girl who once sat crying in a bathroom, vowing she'd never let herself be humiliated again. I wanted to reach back through time and tell her, you kept that promise, even when it hurt. Even when it cost you everything, you kept it. And maybe that's what freedom really is. Not the absence of pain, but the decision to turn pain into purpose. So this is my story. Not the version written by someone else. Not the viral post meant to shame me mine, with all its cracks and scars, but also with its resilience and light. Because sometimes the ending you never expected is the one you write yourself. And if anyone out there is listening, if you've ever been made to feel small, invisible, or unworthy, hear this. You are not the names they call you. You are not the lies they spread. You are the choices you make, the steps you take, the story you decide to tell. And your ending? It's still waiting to be written.